Yo, what's up? 1.4 is here and we finally have the arrival of Jingliu, our first limited 5-star ice damage dealer. She's got a unique playstyle with her spectral transmigration state and is very capable of dealing massive single target and blast damage to enemies. We'll be going over her kit and rotation, builds, teammates, as well as some questions you might have. Is she best with an attack or energy rope, signature light cone or E1, and more. There's a lot to cover, so let's get right into mastering the former sword champion of the Luofu. Jingliu's playstyle revolves around her talent Spectral Transmigration State and its Syzygy mechanic. The skill is the bread and butter of her kit, and using it outside of the state will deal an okay amount of single target damage to an enemy while regenerating 20 energy. Most importantly though, using it grants her 1 stack of Syzygy. Her ultimate, Floor Ephemeral Dream Flux, is an AoE blast attack that deals significant damage to one target and less on those adjacent to it. The ult costs 140 energy and also grants a stack of Syzygy upon use. Jingliu's technique allows her to create a dimension around her for 20 seconds, freezing enemies within its vicinity. Dimensions are extremely strong and apply to each wave in a fight. Only one dimension can be active. When entering battle with the dimension active, Jingliu will regen 15 energy and obtain a stack of Syzygy off the bat. You can also swap to another character to enter battle with an attack or their technique. Enemies within a dimension have a 100% base chance of being frozen for a turn and receive ice damage at the start of it. When Jingliu reaches 2 stacks of Syzygy, she enters the Spectral Transmigration state. This will advance her action forward by 100%, which means she'll be taking another action immediately. This will also give her a substantial crit rate bonus of 50% at level 10. Her skill will be transformed into the enhanced skill Moon on Glacial River. This enhanced skill is a blast attack, dealing even more damage to the primary target and lesser to adjacent ones. It also consumes a stack of Syzygy instead of a skill point, and she won't be able to use her basics while she's in this state. This also makes her very skill point friendly. Now, for why Spectral Transmigration is so important, whenever she uses an attack in this state, her talent will let her consume HP from all other allies equal to 4% of their respective max HP, all to increase her attack by 540% of the HP drained. This does have a cap, but it is quite high, and for reference it would be 180% of her own base attack at level 10. She can have a max of 3 stacks of Syzygy while she's in this state, and once her stacks reach 0, she'll exit it. It's time to go over Jingliu's rotation and when to use each of her abilities. Although her kit's pretty straightforward, there are timings that you don't want to mess up, so let's start from the top. You'll want to enter battle with her dimension active, so you start with 1 stack of Syzygy already. What this means is on her first skill cast, she'll gain that second stack and enter the Spectral Transmigration state immediately. This is great for front loading tons of damage early on, since she gets another turn right away. Note that buffs and debuffs will count down by 1 after taking this extra action. It doesn't work the same way as Seele's Resurgence, for example. The turn instance is completely new. Now, the most important tip to playing Jingliu is that you never want to use her ult outside of the Spectral Transmigration state. You always want to enter the state with her skill, even if that means you're overcapping on energy. If she uses her ult outside, she doesn't get the crit rate or attack bonus from draining her allies' HP. This of course not only makes it significantly weaker, but also she wouldn't get a bonus stack of Syzygy within her Spectral Transmigration state. Every use of her enhanced skill consumes a stack, and the only way to get another one is to use her ult, which also effectively extends her state to allow for 3 enhanced skills instead of 2. This is a huge damage increase, and as rough as it might sound, if you've got too much energy, it's really that important to enter the state with her normal skills only. To summarize, her rotation is actually quite straightforward. You're using her skill every single turn and saving the ult for use within the Spectral Transmigration state. I know it might sound repetitive, but I want to make sure this is drilled into you so that you can play her optimally. There are only a few situations where you could use her ult outside, like when you need to defeat an enemy before they take you out. Maybe getting that second stack to enter the state can help you finish a cycle before it ends, but realistically, you won't find many situations where it's best. Finally, there's one cool tech you can do with her, and it's actually using her ult in her state right after she uses her enhanced skill to reach 0 stacks. That sounds really confusing, but you'll see an example here. What's basically happening is she's almost using her ult to snapshot being in the state, and the ult will still gain the benefits while giving her 1 more stack in that state. The timing is pretty forgiving, so you don't have to stress too much, but you need to press her ult as soon as it's available after casting that enhanced skill. It's time to move on to the build section of the video. Let's get started with the traces. Jingliu will not be using her basic attacks, so you don't need to level this. Because of how impactful her talent is, giving all that crit rate and attack, I'd recommend keeping that around the same level as your skill. Just to give you an idea of how ridiculous it is, the difference between a level 6 and level 9 is like equipping an additional attack percent main stat relic. So for sure, skill and talent are your priorities, followed by the ult. All her major traces are worth unlocking, especially for the minor trace nodes. She's the first character to have speed as a minor trace, and that's quite good considering her playstyle. You'll be able to get 9 speed, 37.3 crit damage, and 10% HP. The effect res here is okay, it can provide some utility and save you in a pinch. The 10% action advance can be good, letting you enter the spectral transmigration state quicker. And finally, Jingliu's Ascension 6 bonus trace even further encourages players to use her ult within her state since it'll get increased damage. As for light cones, it's actually pretty straightforward. Jingliu's signature I shall be my own sword is by far and away her best in slot. It gives her crit damage and a passive that she'll always max out on in her spectral transmigration state. At S1, when reaching 3 stacks, it'll give Jingliu's attacks a 42% damage bonus and a 12% enemy defense ignore. Both damage percent and defense ignore are fairly undiluted within her kit, which makes these bonuses a lot more valuable. As far as other options go, a Secret Vow at S5 is slightly ahead of an S5 Aeon given fair uptimes on each. S5 Aeon beats out lower superimposition levels of Secret Vow, but these are light cones I'd recommend to most players who aren't looking to get her signature. Under the Blue Sky is close, and if you've already got other characters using the other two, then go ahead with this. I wanted to touch on Imbiber Lunae and Blade's light cones really quickly. Unfortunately, all they provide is a base attack and crit rate, which Jingliu doesn't really need since she gets so much in her state. The passives unfortunately don't work well with her playstyle as well, so I recommend staying away from using them. As for relic sets, you really have two options: Hunter of Glacial Forests, the Ice set, and Genius of Brilliant Stars, the Quantum set. Now, in general use cases, the Ice set will come out on top, but not by much. Against enemies with Quantum weakness, or if you're using Silverwolf, the Quantum set can actually be better. When you combine multiple sources of defense tread, like throwing in a Pella or her signature light cone, it'll increase your damage output exponentially up until 100% when enemies have 0 defense. So in situations where there are multiple sources of defense down, Quantum will be the better option. That being said, it's close enough where substats take priority, so choose whichever one has the best rolls overall. If you can't complete a 4-piece, then 2-piece mix of Ice set and Musketeer can be a good placeholder. I'm not going to recommend any other planar set aside from Redolent. It should be self-explanatory. The 2-piece gives 8% crit rate and 20% more skill damage, which is exactly what Jingliu wants. The requirement to hit 70% is pretty trivial for her as well, even if you have 0 crit rate subs. If you factor in her talent, base crit rate of 5, and Redolent, you're already at 63%. As for main stats, you really want that crit damage body, no questions asked. The majority of your damage will come in your spectral transmigration state when you have that massive crit rate increase, and I'm talking like 90% of your damage comes from there, so you really don't need a crit rate body. Speed boots, the target will be 134 speed, so you can get that extra turn during the first cycle of Memory of Chaos. You really don't want to forego speed boots since she relies so much on getting into her state quickly, and speed boots will facilitate that. Ice damage orb and attack percent rope, no questions. More on that in a second. For substats, you're really just looking for enough speed to get you to 134. Luckily, since she has speed traces, that means you only need about 2 to 3 rolls in substats. Other than that, look for crit damage and attack percent. Crit rate is also very good until you get to that 50% mark. Attack or energy regen. Jingliu has a 140 cost ult, which can be concerning, but this is by design. She'll lose out on too much damage if she switches to an energy regen rope, and none of her optimal rotations will net her an extra turn early on her ult. Even if she does get her ult earlier, she doesn't want to use it unless she's in the spectral transmigration state, as we've mentioned many times now. So often when testing ER rope, we get our ult too early, and then we're overcapping on energy anyway. Now that's not to say energy rope is always bad, there are situations where you can make it work like this one. You can get your ult straight away after entering the spectral transmigration state to go for a quick nuke, though if the fight isn't going to end in less than a couple cycles, attack rope will just scale better. All of Jingliu's Eidolons increase her damage output, so if you do get any, just know that each one will provide some value. Her E1 increases her crit damage for 1 turn after using her ult or enhanced skill. Also, if only one target is attacked, then an additional attack will be unleashed on that target, dealing ice damage equal to 100% of Jingliu's attack. You can think of this like adding an additional 100% attack scaling to both her enhanced skill and ult. Now, against single targets, when factoring in the crit damage boost as well, this can be around a 40% damage increase. Unfortunately, in the current state of the game, we aren't really fighting many standalone enemies, and even if we are, the fight's already over. The crit damage is still nice though, and works all the time, so this Eidolon gets a 2.5 out of 4 tile rating. E2 is a nice bonus for one of her enhanced skills during her state, though again, it has the main drawback of only buffing 1. This one gets a 1.5 tile out of 4 rating. E3 increases levels on the ult and talent by 2, which are pretty substantial, so this gets a 3 out of 4 tile rating. E4 increases the attack gain and cap of her talent, leading to quite a bit more consistent damage. This one also gets a 3 out of 4 tile rating. E5 increases the skill, which is nice, but the basic is pretty much inconsequential, so this one gets a 2 out of 4 tile rating. E6 is a big one, and it comes with a change in her rotation. It can also open the possibility of using an energy regen rope, since you can get 3 to 4 skills in, but the crit damage increase by 50% and entering with 1 additional stack is massive, so this one of course will get a perfect 4 out of 4 tile rating. If you do want to go further with Jingliu, what's better, E1 or her signature? Luckily, this one's pretty straightforward. Her signature takes the cake. It's just so much further ahead of the rest of the light cone options, and E1's main benefit requires specific conditions to be met. With her light cone, you just get reliable and predictable damage increases in the areas that her base kit doesn't fulfill either, which makes it even more valuable. Jingliu's best teammate is Bronya. The extra action advance forward lets her get into her state quicker, and she can benefit from all her buffs. This one's sort of a no-brainer. Do note though, that Bronya's skill buff only lasts 1 turn, and if Jingliu's action advances forward with her talent afterwards, that following turn won't benefit from the skill. Still though, this is a great synergy, since Jingliu is very skill point friendly thanks to only consuming Syzygy stacks in her spectral transmigration state. Pella's also a great partner for her with her massive AoE defense shred and being skill point positive. This goes even further in value if Jingliu has her signature and or 4-piece quantum. Pella also gets some additional utility with her ice res shred from E4. Tingyun is quite solid, providing good attack and damage bonuses, while also refilling her high cost ult. Do note though that if you do pair her with Tingyun, you'll find instances where again, you're at full energy but not in the spectral transmigration state. Please, wait until you're in there before using the ult. Asta can be good, giving a team-wide speed buff on her ult and attack buff from her talent. Yukong can have some potential as well, but just be careful, Jingliu can eat up both stacks of Yukong's roaring bowstrings. Blade can be good, and it's nice that Jingliu can proc a stack of his talent with each attack in her state, but in most instances, this is a matter of overinvestment, where you've got a really strong Blade and Jingliu. They'll do well just cause they're strong. The common team template would be a solo sustainer, either Luocha, Bailu, Lynx, or even Natasha. Preservation characters can work in shorter fights, but ideally you want a healer. You have your Jingliu, and then you have 2 more slots for supporting options. Bronya and Pella are currently the best, though Pella can be interchangeable with Silverwolf for non-Ice Week content. Since not everyone has Bronya, you can use a Tingyun, Asta, or even Yukong instead. As for the Blade team, you want your Soul Sustain, Jingliu, Blade, and you could use Bronya, but since her skill can only buff 1 ally at a time, Pella would be the better pick here. This team will still steamroll most enemies with a couple more Blade follow-up attacks than normal, and both Blade and Jingliu benefiting from Pella's AoE defense shred. And there you have it, you're now ready to master Jingliu. She's an excellent destruction damage healer, and finally we have one for ice. As far as limited 5-star DPS strength goes, it's safe to say she's up there with them and will be a good pull if you're looking for one. She's very self-sufficient in that she can buff her own attack and crit rate, and she'll work well with a wide variety of supports. Honestly, you can fit her into many existing team comps already, and while she does like Bronya a lot, she's not necessary for her to do well. She's also a very skill point efficient damage dealer in that she'll only ever need to use 2 skill points consecutively at most. Fortunately for her, when she's in her spectral transmigration state, her enhanced skills only consume stacks of syzygy. Her playstyle and rotation feel very fluid and should be quite easy for most players to learn. Her technique is also pretty busted and in those challenging fights when you use it. As a bonus, it's also quite good against the Trotters in Swarm Disaster, so you'll never lose on that stage again. Overall, I'm pretty happy with her, and I wish you all the best of luck on your summons. Hopefully you get a couple copies of Qingqie as well, who knows? Anyway, if you found any of this info helpful, do consider dropping a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.